Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
During the altercation, one of the men entered the roadway and was struck by a transit bus.
A scuffle in Burnaby leaves one man seriously hurt and another in custody. Also,
and we all lost, part of ourselves, again, because of one person's decision.
Powerful victim impact statements at the sentencing hearing for a mother who killed her 8-year-old daughter. And
everyone in Canada should have access to prescription drugs.
the call for taxpayer-funded medication for everyone.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening. A 33-year-old Delta man is fighting for his life tonight after being hit by a transit bus.
As the CBC's Tina Lovegreen reports, it happened moments after an apparent confrontation with another man in Burnaby.
Surveillance video shows what appears to be an argument between two men. The confrontation turns physical. It's not clear from the video if one of the men pushed the other or if the man fell over and into the street. At that moment, he's hit by a transit bus. We've chosen not to show the collision, but the man is seen laying on the pavement. Minutes later, people rush to help.
33-year-old man suffered life-threatening injuries in a collision involving a transit bus yesterday.
Yellow tape still lines the crime scene here at Hastings Street and Carlton Avenue in Burnaby. A massive blue tarp wraps around the front of the bus. Bloodstains still on the pavement.
How the man entered the roadway is still under investigation. 2 men were arrested at scene. A 62-year-old man is still in custody. No charges have been laid at this time.
Several people say one of the men panhandles in the area. Police say they're still going through evidence, trying to determine if the 2 men knew each other and what led to the dispute. Police say the bus driver isn't under investigation. Meanwhile, they're asking for anyone with information or video to come forward. Tina Lovegreen, CBC News, Burnaby.
Powerful and emotional victim impact statements today at the sentencing for a Surrey mom who smothered her 8-year-old daughter to death with a plastic bag.
it happened more than 4 years ago, but as Mickey Cowan reports, little Tegan Batstone's father says his family still lives in constant fear.
That smile, who could resist it?
For Gabe Batstone and his family, Tegan's murder has been devastating.
We all lost, part of ourselves, again, because of one person's decision.
Today, in his victim impact statement, he asked a judge and a courtroom of onlookers to put themselves in his shoes. He spoke of the special moments he'll never have, witnessing her graduation, marriage, even something as simple as taking a trip to the grocery store.
Frankly, she should spend the rest of her life behind bars, in my opinion, and is lucky to be alive. Within the constraints of this situation, I just hope that her brothers are adults before they have to know that the person who killed their sister is walking free.
It's not just her dad who has been hit hard. There's a whole family, including her stepbrother and half-brother. Court heard the 7-year-old is afraid he too is going to be killed, submitting this picture to the judge to show just how he feels. The 13-year-old has had to change schools because of bullying and kids not understanding the impact.
That's the reality. There's a stigma attached to murder. My children know it, and so they don't just feel grief, they also feel shame, which they should never feel.
Tegan's stepmom Stephanie says the family lives in fear. Lisa Batstone was silent in the court as she listened to the victim impact statements. But when she went to leave, she partially collapsed onto a railing, sobbing. Her fate now lies in the hands of the judge. Mickey Cowan, CBC News, New Westminster.
A Powell River man charged in a double homicide almost 2 years ago on the Sunshine Coast has been found not criminally responsible on account of mental disorder. Jason Folds was 19 when charged with the murder of Braxton Leaks and Dylan Buckle, as well as the attempted murder of Zane Hernandez. In June 2017, police responded to an early Saturday morning report a person had been shot at a home in the village of Lund. The deaths rocked the small, tight-knit community, with many businesses lowering their flags in mourning. Folds is still in custody at the Forensic Psychiatric Hospital in Coquitlam and will stay there until a review board disposition.
There is some good news tonight for people who worked for a Port Moody pub operator who owed them thousands of dollars in wages and tips.
It looks like they'll be getting their money, but as Bathe reports, another ex-employee of the now defunct Brew Street Craft and Kitchen says working there cost him everything.
Work on a construction site is a far cry from work in a pub, but Carver Lloyd says he had no choice.
It cost me my apartment as I couldn't pay rent. It cost me mass amounts of debt because of racked up credit cards, and I took loans out just to try and make ends meet.
For 3 months last winter, the 28-year-old worked as a cook at Brew Street Craft and Kitchen, a Port Moody pub that went out of business in January, leaving several ex-employees unpaid by company president David James.
The check in December had bounced, and he said he was going to get me paid and never did. It was kind of just, oh, I'll give you a little bit of money here, a little bit of cash there.
Lloyd has filed a $1,300 claim with the BC Ministry of Labour's Employment Standards Branch. Documents obtained by CBC show last week the branch made a preliminary assessment that David James owes 7 other employees nearly $12,000 in back pay. A branch delegate wrote, the complainants have not been paid regular wages, statutory holiday pay, vacation pay, and compensation for length of service in accordance with the Act. 19-year-old Jaden Rudlin also worked in Brew Street's kitchen. Employment Standards has assessed James owes him over $600.
I could have been nice about this, but him ignoring me has just gotten me so much more frustrated, and it's hard because there's nothing really I can do. I gave it to Employment Standards, and it's kind of out of my hands. It's been like 4 months now.
Rudlin doesn't have his money yet, but one of his colleagues does. Sydney Iverson didn't go to Employment Standards. On Monday, she accepted a bank draft from James worth over $3,600. CBC reached out multiple times to James. Twice this week, he agreed to meet for an interview. Twice, he canceled, then ignored requests to reschedule. The branch had given him until 4 o'clock yesterday to voluntarily submit the owed monies.
At the end of the day, the Employment Standards Branch wouldn't say if that had actually happened, saying only that the Brew Street Craft and Kitchen file is still an open investigation. Belle Puri, CBC News, Vancouver.
Well, a trio of BC-designed satellites used to manage disasters, monitor forest fires, and help farmers blasted into space today. The RadarSat satellites lifted off aboard a SpaceX rocket from California. They were designed and parts of them were built at the MDA facilities right here in Richmond. The $1.2 billion project replaces a radar satellite that's been in orbit since 2007. Once they're fully deployed, the 3 satellites will orbit Earth every 96 minutes. They're expected to generate 250,000 pictures of the planet per year.
Legal representatives for the Anita Place homeless camp in Maple Ridge were back in BC Supreme Court today. They're trying to convince the judge to make changes to an injunction order from February. Lawyers say the city has made life more dangerous for the few occupants who remain at Anita Place, especially those who use drugs. And residents have described the security measures at the camp as oppressive.
Since that order was granted, the city has taken a number of actions which have effectively closed camp and blocked people from visiting and blocked people from accessing harm reduction on that site. So we're back in court today seeking clarification from the judge who issued that order about whether it is being used the way he wanted it to be.
The city's lawyer hopes to have the application dismissed with the ultimate goal of reducing the number of people who still live at Anita Place.
Well, there are more homeless people on the streets of Vancouver than ever recorded before. The city's latest homeless count showing 2,223 people. The number has grown by 2% since last year, despite the city's effort to bring it down. It's the 4th year in a row it has increased. Around 400 volunteers surveyed the streets and shelters over 2 days back in March.
I think we're all devastated by it. I think council, this has been an issue that's been top of mind for many councils over the last decade or so, and I think that we're just starting to see it stabilize. Again, I pull it back to the Prime Minister. I mean, I do think that if you make a pledge that to half the homelessness rate, you got to start working on it now. It can't just be talk.
Stewart says although the numbers are disappointing, he's encouraged the rate of growth has slowed compared to past years.
Well, house prices may be dropping, but they remain way out of reach for millennials across the country. The average Canadian aged 25 to 34 needs to make twice what they earn to afford to buy housing, according to a new UBC study called Straddling the Gap. In Vancouver, millennials would have to earn more than $200,000 a year to afford the average priced home. That's 4 times what they make right now. Alternatively, house prices would need to drop by half.
Well, bear sightings in BC are up, way up. Conservation officers say they got more calls this May compared with the same month over the past 9 years. There were more than 3,000 black bear sightings, up over a third from last year. Bears come out of hibernation around April every year, and that's when the counting begins. Grizzly bear sightings are also higher than usual. Conservation officers attribute the increase to a healthy bear population and a high birth rate.
Well, it seems like we've been getting quite the orca show lately, and now another one.
Yes, at least 3 of them have been splashing around in False Creek this afternoon. Have a look.
Yellow red, Vancouver tours. The pod is coming right at you. I need you to go eavesdrop.
As if the beautiful weather isn't enough, the lucky few along the seawall were treated to this scene of transient killer whales. And although it's uncommon to see them come this close to the city center, orcas have actually been making cameos in cell phone videos all around the coast over the past couple of months, including a rare white whale calf spotted off the coast of Nanaimo. That's the first in decades.
Just love those shots. The orcas with the towers in the background. It's
gorgeous
just it's fantastic
and surprising.
Yes, and Bretta's here. Great day for orca watching.
It's a great day for watching it, though I can't imagine those orcas were cooling down by being in the water at this close to the city. I mean, look at this. We had some record-breaking heat, not only across Vancouver, but across much of the province. The old record back on this day back in 1999 was 27.4, and earlier on the afternoon, we actually got up to a temperature of 29.1, if you can believe it. So that record definitely smashed all the way across the province as well, Abbotsford as well, Lytton, Kelowna, these places, regular spots, of course, that do get into those very mild temperatures, but I would dare say this is quite frankly hot. Same thing, Vancouver Island, if you can believe it. Port Alberni knocked that record out of the park, 34 degrees there, 32 in Nanaimo, and even the airport, if you can believe it, in Victoria, did actually get up to 29. And Seattle, now that is unusual, seeing 35 degrees there.
Okay, thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
First Nations in northern BC are pushing the province to endorse an ambitious proposal, a 40,000 square kilometer conservation area to protect major watersheds and sensitive species. The plan, which is 2 decades in the making, would cover the ancestral lands of 3 Cascadena First Nations and would be larger than Vancouver Island. Those spearheading the project say they've been in discussion with BC for the past 7 months, but haven't yet received a firm response. They add the federal government has been supportive, but worry BC's complacency could tank the project.
Mayor Kennedy Stewart says high costs and a potential event sponsor are the reasons Vancouver doesn't have a public viewing party for the Toronto Raptors NBA Finals run.
At the city, we were negotiating with the NBA, and the NBA had found us a private sponsor in order to put this big package together downtown. Unfortunately, news of this deal kind of got out to the media over the weekend before it was supposed to happen, and there was a lot of hype about what this would actually be. The sponsor got a bit spooked by the potential costs, and they walked away, and that was it.
And why can't the city
Speaking to CBC's The Early Edition host Stephen Quinn, Stewart said costs like policing also prevented the city from hosting a sort of Jurassic Park West, with the summer already crowded with events that are expensive for the city, like Italian Day.
A townhouse complex on Vancouver Island is at the center of a legal dispute between the province's architectural watchdog and the city of Langford. The Architectural Institute of BC says the complex was built without the input of an architect, and that's in violation of the province's Architects Act, and that the city of Langford should never have issued a building permit. The acts prohibit anyone other than a licensed architect from working on residential buildings with 5 or more units. But Langford officials say it is not the city's responsibility to enforce provincial legislation, only municipal bylaws.
I hate duplication. We shouldn't be using my staff and the architect staff. And for them to say that it's unsafe, if Langford signs off, no, I actually adhere to the building code. We have professionals, that's what they do. As it's a monopoly situation when every development in Langford that is of a small size has to have an architect there.
Right now, the province is not commenting on the situation, saying it is up to the courts to decide.
Good news for students who live in Victoria. Those 18 and under will get to ride public transit for free starting next year. The Victoria Regional Transit Commission unanimously approved the plan, which will provide more than 6,000 students with free bus passes. The Commission says it'll use parking revenues to pay the estimated cost of $857,000 a year. It's all part of the city's plan to fight climate change and reduce emissions.
Canada should have universal pharmacare. That's the top recommendation by a federal advisory council today.
It's calling for taxpayer-funded medication starting in January of 2022.
What we found was, more than anything else, a strongly shared belief that everyone in Canada should have access to prescription drugs based on their need rather than their ability to pay.
The council proposes starting with a basic plan that covers essential drugs, but the goal would be to add more medications to the list over time. When fully implemented, the annual cost would be $15 billion. The council says the plan would drive down the costs of drugs, saving Canadians $5 billion a year. But the proposed plan is getting mixed reviews from the opposition.
I don't believe that anybody thinks that when Liberals announce multi-billion-dollar spending programs that they're going to save money. And the fact of the matter is they've been making this promise since 1997. And in the dying days of a scandal-plagued government, they're trying to bring this forward.
The Liberals haven't proposed their plan. There's a report that makes recommendations which support our plan, but there is no Liberal plan at this point in time.
The issue of pharmacare will likely be a major topic during the fall federal election.
Results of a new study reveal that while anesthetics might be helping you avoid pain during surgery, they're also hurting our planet.
They may make up to as much as 8% of all greenhouse gas emissions in the U.S.
CBC's health reporter Christine Birak explains hospitals are now looking at changes in the operating room that could go a long way to reducing the damage.
Anyone about to undergo major surgery isn't thinking about climate change. They need general anesthetic to sleep through the pain.
All right, so we use 2 different gases in anesthesia. We use sevoflurane and desflurane.
The 2 commonly used anesthetic gases can work equally as well, but one is harder on the planet than the other. Sevoflurane lasts about a year in the environment. Desflurane lingers up to 14 years, traps 5 to 20 times more heat, and costs roughly twice as much as the alternative. To quantify the impact of desflurane gas, Dr. Timur Ozalsel did some calculations. When desflurane is used in one operating room for 7 hours, it has the same impact as driving a car from North Cape, Norway, down to Cape Town, South Africa. So why don't doctors just switch?
If you've been using this for the last 15 or 20 years, you'll be worried about trying something new.
But this information isn't being taught to most medical students either, nor is it required. So a small number of Ontario hospitals have decided, while patient care obviously comes first, they had to do something about anesthetic gases.
The gases go into the patient, they get exhaled through the endotracheal tube.
It doesn't take much gas to put a patient under.
So how much of the gas is the patient actually taking in?
The patient is actually only taking in about 5% of the anesthetic gas. The rest is actually exhaled.
The other 95% is sucked through a pipe and released onto the roof of the hospital, sometimes knocking out birds. Here at Toronto General, they're capturing that extra gas.
This gets connected to the canister, and then the gases get absorbed within the canister.
Well, here the canisters, they come from the hospital. So
Dushanka Filipovic founded Blue Zone. Her canisters trap anesthetic gas molecules in a filter so they can be extracted and recycled back into new anesthetics.
So basically, it's a cradle-to-cradle, type of solution.
Whether it's switching anesthetic gases or capturing them, new solutions are needed. And some argue they'll come when governments start regulating medical emissions. The World Health Organization has said climate change is the #1 health issue of the century. Christine Birak, CBC News, Toronto.
Britain has an ambitious new plan to fight climate change. Outgoing Prime Minister Theresa May wants to make the country's carbon footprint almost invisible, and she's hoping other major economies will follow suit.
Well, I believe that we have a moral duty to leave this world in a better condition than what we inherited. And that's why today we're announcing that we will be ending our contribution to climate change by 2050 and legislating for a net zero emissions target.
Net zero doesn't mean no pollution, though. It means they'll drastically reduce greenhouse gas emissions to the point that they can be absorbed by the planet. The plan also allows farmers and companies to offset their emissions by paying for trees to be planted elsewhere.
This was our one scorcher of a day.
It was absolutely scorching, I'll give you that. I mean, I put that bold forecast out there to say 28, 29. The fact that we actually got up to 29 in Vancouver, I mean, I was actually kind of shocked by that. But don't worry, if you don't like the heat, it's actually going to tone down a little bit. But I wanted to show you a beautiful sunrise that we had this morning. We often see a lot of these, but just check this out. The clouds go crazy, the sun comes up, and then that temperature right there, already 20-ish degrees as soon as we get first thing into the waking hours of the morning, and it just stayed hot all day. If you were out there, I don't need to convince you. I know you probably felt it. And the whole reason I've been showing this map every single day because this is largely our dominant weather story. This is that high pressure that was bringing in all of that warm air from the south, and as you saw earlier, those temperatures in Seattle even reaching 35 degrees earlier on in the day. Watch what happens though. This is going to be pushing farther to the east. As it does so, the clockwise circulation around the high is going to start bringing the winds in from the north and the west. That means cooler temperatures. Now, certainly the jet stream is still going to be preventing any of this rain from making it on shore, but at least there's going to be a little bit of a reprieve from the heat. As that high pressure is moving out, one of the things that it's going to do, though, is pick up the winds, especially around Victoria Harbour. Now, even though the number here says 35, it's actually going to be closer to about 60 kilometers per hour into the afternoon on Thursday. So if you are intending to do any crossings there between Vancouver and Victoria, say, do be mindful that it could be a little choppy. Another note, on the island and across the province, we've been seeing our fire danger ratings escalate quite a lot, and now we're actually getting into extreme territory once again for parts of southern Vancouver Island and even into the Sunshine Coast. So these hot and these dry conditions are just going to be continuing on for the next little while. Now, that said, temperatures are going to be cooling down, as I said, all relatively speaking, cooling 23, 22, 21, and we should be hovering around there for the remainder of the upcoming days.
I like to be warm, so I'll say that's pretty cool.
All right, that works.
Thanks, Brett.
You're welcome.
Hong Kong police used pepper spray, tear gas, and rubber bullets to hold back thousands of protesters today. Authorities say at least 7 people were sent to hospital. Some of the demonstrators tried to storm the territory's legislature to prevent debate of a proposed extradition bill. The law would let China bring Hong Kong residents to the mainland to face trial in the Chinese court system. Many see that as an attempt to silence opposition in Hong Kong and a threat to the territory's semi-autonomous status.
2 Canadian women kidnapped in Ghana more than a week ago have been rescued during an armed raid.
They have been in contact with the Canadian authorities and are undergoing the necessary evaluations following a traumatic incident like this. Preliminary indications that we have is that they are fine.
19-year-old Lauren Tilley and 20-year-old Bailey Chitty were in Ghana working for Youth Challenge International. They were taken at a golf club in the southern region of the country. Shots were fired in today's raid. Tilley and Chitty weren't hurt, but one of the 8 suspects was. It's not known when the pair will be returning to Canada.
Well, thanks for watching on Facebook Live tonight. We'll be back on CBC television after tonight's hockey game with more local news. And you can always find our news program online at cbc.ca/BC. Our next local news right here at 11 after the National.
And on a gorgeous late spring day, we'll leave you with pictures of Vancouverites soaking up the sun. Have a good night.